Hey folks, welcome back. If this isn't your first time watching this channel, then you've probably seen this image before. I think it's appeared in nearly every video I've made for Slugscape. I love to use it not simply because it features some of my favorite figure molds in the game, but because it so adequately represents what I consider to be the three pillars of Heroscape: history, sci-fi, and fantasy. When Heroscape launched back in 2004, it promised us the experience of participating in the battle of all time, waged across the mythical fields of Valhalla. Warriors from all creeds found themselves swept up into the conflict. Samurai, robots, dinosaurs, you name it. Heroscape established itself as a game where you never knew what would release next. Over the years, the makeup of these core pillars would shift dramatically, so I thought it would be insightful to investigate this further today. Nearly every army card released within the game can be linked back to one of these core pillars, so let's start by taking a look at the breakdown within the original Rise of the Valkyrie Master Set. To this day, I think this remains one of the greatest rosters of figures contained within a single Heroscape release. There's so much variety here to appeal to all sorts of tastes. Some of the figures are fairly easy to categorize under the three pillars I mentioned earlier: the Airborne Elite, Allied Paratroopers of World War II; history, Deathwalker 9000 and his robotic Zedian guards; sci-fi, easy enough. Others had to be a bit more of a judgment call. For example, the Morrow Warriors do visually resemble undead horrors that might exist within a fantasy setting, but their high-tech laser weapons betray this assumption. Ultimately, here's the breakdown I came up with. Our historical figures include the Vikings, samurai, and allied soldiers. In total, there are 6 army cards that I would attribute to the history pillar. Our science fiction-based figures include the aforementioned Morrow and Deathwalker army cards, as well as Agent Carr and the Krav Maga agents from Earth's future. All told, there are 6 army cards I would associate with the sci-fi pillar. Lastly, we get a menagerie of fantastical characters, with Raylan, Sivaris, Grimnak, and Mimring all falling under the fantasy pillar, 4 in total. Because graphs are fun, here's a pie chart with our findings. Honestly, it's a pretty even split, setting up a solid foundation for the future of the game. A future which, because I apparently have nothing better to do, I've gone through and charted out. The Swarm of the Morrow Master Set, as well as all of Classicscape's original waves, plus an additional graph for all of the promo, terrain expansion, or standalone figure sets. Altogether, I find it fascinating to see the trends shift from wave to wave. That being said, on the whole, Heroscape was quite consistent with its output, delivering on its initial promise of giving us the battle of all time. That is, before the dark times, before the Empire. Have I mentioned that I don't like D&Dscape? Oh, I have? Oh good, just checking. Yeah, this sucks. All the fun and whimsy of Heroscape was sucked away to turn it into a transparently corporate way to sell a licensed IP to an audience held hostage. This is why I sometimes chafe against folks lumping D&Dscape in with Classicscape. I understand that in certain contexts, it can be prudent to do so, but these are categorically not the same thing. Mechanically compatible? Yes, but canonically and thematically worlds apart. I would be remiss not to mention the work of Valhalla Customs and their strive to return to the three pillars of Heroscape. I'm not intimately familiar enough with these figures to fully weigh in, but even a cursory glance shows that this team of passionate individuals understood what was thematically significant to Heroscape's identity. My hat's off to them. So now let's see how Age of Annihilation stacks up. If I'm honest, not too well. All 3 pillars are represented, but the proportions are significantly skewed, with fantasy outweighing both history and sci-fi by more than 2 to 1. This is kind of a big problem. To be fair to Renegade Game Studios, this isn't a problem of their own cause. They inherited the work of Avalon Hill and their design team known as the War Council. All of the Age of Annihilation figures we've seen so far were developed by this group. Obviously, there were many veteran designers on this team, so I don't believe this thematic misdirection was a case of incompetence. Instead, it seems that there were certain marching orders from Hasbro during the HasLab campaign that forced their hand. I'll link to an insightful interview hosted by Tabletop Bro at the end of the video. Like I said, this isn't a problem Renegade caused. However, it is now a problem that I think they need to fix. The bulk of releases in 2025 are likely to be populated by the rest of the War Council designs, and they seem heavily tuned towards fantasy, with a small smattering of sci-fi thrown in. What we're really missing is history. How can it be the battle of all time without it? I sincerely hope that Renegade takes this into consideration when developing their own army cards for 2026 and beyond. Heroscape needs its 3 pillars to retain its narrative identity. Meatloaf might proclaim that 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but this slug remains convinced that 3 out of 3 would be a lot better. Here's hoping. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and until next time, happy scaping.